If you've been on the internet in the past 2, 3 weeks, you must have seen the episode that broke the internet. It's a podcast episode that was aired on So This Is Love, the one by Gaitho. And they were talking about Sophia and Bumpy, two people who have a very chaotic relationship. So many videos have been done about it. So many people have spoken about what they thought of that episode. It seems like everybody wanted to speak about it because it broke something in their minds for some reason. But when I listened to it, honestly, what came up for me was the stuff that we keep talking about over and over again, and that is why people stay in abusive relationships. People have various reasons for staying in abusive relationships. We don't talk about them enough. We always often blame the victims of the abuse without understanding that there are a lot of psychological powers that are working in the background that make a person who is in an abusive relationship to stay. So they don't just stay because they're not seeing the abuse. Of course, they're seeing the abuse. To a degree, they are. So they're not staying because they can't see it. Often, they will stay for other reasons. And I wanted to touch on 2 or 3 reasons why people stay in abusive relationships that you can use to think about when you hear somebody's in an abusive relationship and they are staying. And maybe you're asking yourself, why would you stay in that kind of a relationship? The most common reason why people stay in abusive relationships is because of something called a trauma bond. A trauma bond is what a layman would call Stockholm syndrome. Trauma bonding in psychology is the damaging emotional connection that forms between a victim of abuse and their abuser. This person is being abused and they get emotionally connected, very deeply emotionally connected to their abuser. And the reason they get emotionally connected to their abuser is because of the cycle that they're living in. So the cycle ordinarily will be there's a victim of abuse who is abused by the person they're emotionally connected to. It could be a spouse, it could be a family member. So they are abused by this family member or this spouse, and then the spouse starts apologizing. They apologize, they do whatever they can to try to win back their trust and their affection. And then, because the victim sees the apology and sees the effort that the abuser is putting in, the victim accepts the apology, starts to be a little bit more lenient, more accepting towards the abuser. They stay in a relative period of calm, and then something happens, and the abuser takes that as a trigger for them. The abuser takes it out on the victim, and then the victim, of course, withdraws. The abuser realizes that they have done it again. The abuser realizes, oh, I've abused this person again. The abuser goes ahead and starts to apologize. The victim gives in, and the cycle continues over and over and over again. Sometimes there's threats that are involved in that cycle of abuse. The abuser could be threatening the victim with things, whatever. It could be violence, it could be mistreatment, it could be some sort of danger. They could be threatening them like that. It could be that the victim of abuse is very isolated, that they are afraid even if they leave the abuser, they will not survive on their own. And so they continue staying in the abusive relationship for as long as possible because for them it is the only way they think they can survive. And that's how the cycle of abuse continues over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. And we keep asking, why does this person not leave? But when you realize that there's a trauma bond that they've already formed with this person and it is deeply, deeply emotional, it is very powerful, then you can start to empathize with the person and understand that it's not just a logical decision to get up and leave. That logical decision does not happen to everyone. Remember, sometimes people could have elements of low self-esteem where they are unable to see themselves as anything without the light that is cast on them by this person that they idolize, right? Sometimes it's an attachment issue. People have different attachment styles that are connected to their childhood. If, for example, you're operating from an anxious attachment style or a disorganized attachment style, you might find that becoming trauma bonded to an abuser might happen to you more often if your attachment style is not a secure one. Because if you have a secure attachment, of course, you value yourself highly, you see yourself as worthy, and you know that you can survive on your own. You know that you're loved and you're lovable. If anybody tries to convince you otherwise, ordinarily it backfires when it's somebody who is securely attached. They have other healthy relationships and they're not dependent on just one relationship. So because of the isolation, the loneliness, fear, and the low self-esteem and the attachment issues, you may find that Sophia might have stayed in that relationship for those kinds of reasons. And they're not usually reasons that people articulate and say, I am staying in this relationship because I have low self esteem. That's not how it will come out. It will just be seen in the behaviors, or it will be, I am staying in this relationship. I don't know why. But when you follow closely, when you listen closely, you find out that this person is actually anxiously attached. And it is that, as I've said, it's that cycle of this relative peace. Everything is going kind of okay. And then something happens. The abuser feels triggered, and then they abuse their victim. They take advantage of them, they mistreat them, and then they come back and start reconciling and trying to make promises for change. They try to give the victim some hope that the relationship can be redeemed, that they will improve, that they will change. And you'll notice that during that time, they will be telling them things like, if you had not done X, Y, and Z, I would not have been so angry. I would not have beaten you. If you had not gone to that party that I told you not to go, you see, I would not have been so angry. So next time, please don't try to offend me so that I can change. I want this relationship to work. But then they're not trying to have the relationship work. They just want you to stay under their thumb. So that's how trauma bonds work. And that's why you may find somebody who is in an abusive relationship staying longer than they should. Something else that we don't talk about when it comes to why people stay in abusive relationships is societal and cultural pressures. When you look at our society, there's a kind of pressure that is put on, especially women, to stay in relationships and to vumilia in those relationships. Like persevering in a relationship is seen as a badge of honor. And if you don't persevere, people will question you. They're like, what do you mean? Why can't you persevere and persist and hold on? Why are you walking away from something that could be good? And I think part of the reason we are pressured to stay in relationships is because there's an idealization and a romanticization of romantic relationships. There's a way they have been put up above every other kind of relationship. They are emphasized as the ultimate kind of relationships that anybody can have. When you're not in a relationship, when you're single, when you've been single for a long time, people question that. They're like, why have you been single for so long? Or why are you not in a relationship? What are you doing to get in a relationship? If you are not in a relationship, people pity you. I don't know if the pity is real or not, but they'll be like, "Wa Akiwoye, I hope you find someone, there's someone out there for you. Don't worry. Everybody has their person." And when you hear those kinds of things, it's very easy to start internalizing that a romantic relationship is the ultimate kind of relationship you can have. And if you don't have it, then there's a problem with you. And if you have low self-esteem and you think that there's something wrong with you because you're not in a romantic relationship, you're easier to control because when you get into a relationship, you will do whatever it takes to maintain that relationship no matter what. You're the person who will familiar a lot of things because you want to retain the status of being in a relationship. And this, of course, now makes unhealthy behaviors in relationships very common. It emphasizes that loyalty is the biggest thing you can do in a relationship. You are discouraged from leaving. You are told that God hates divorce. So you stay in an abusive marriage for long because you're afraid of offending God by leaving. You become very afraid of the judgment that will befall you if you leave a relationship. People from the outside will always say, why would you leave a relationship? Why will you not work on it? But they also do not understand the reality of that relationship. You're the one in the relationship every single day. You're the one who is with that other person every single day. You're the one who knows what happens in the confines of your home. So other people's judgment becomes part of your shackles, becomes part of the things that are keeping you in an abusive relationship. The shame that you have around being seen as a failure for not succeeding in staying in a marriage or maintaining a relationship, that becomes part of the reasons why you stay in an abusive relationship. If you are out there and you're afraid of being seen as a divorcee, you feel that the stigma will be too much. Being seen as the person who walked away from a marriage is going to be too much. Then you become very easy to control. Because for you, the fear of judgment is bigger than the fear of losing yourself. You'd rather lose yourself in an abusive relationship than step outside, go live your life, build something for yourself. Even if you have children, you can still do it, but most people don't believe that they can. Of course, the abuser, the person that you're in a relationship with, takes advantage of that kind of societal pressure because it serves them. If they can keep you under their thumb, if they know that society encourages you to stay in a relationship, then they feel that they have enough leeway to do whatever they want because society will encourage you to take it on. Society will encourage you to persevere and hold on no matter what they put you through. So they have no incentive to change their behavior. I don't know if you see how, in that case, the beliefs we have as a people kind of sets us up for failure from the very beginning. It's very, very common for people to stay in abusive relationships just because of the societal and cultural pressure that they feel they must maintain. You're afraid that if you go to church and you are divorced, or you're the person who had been married for a long time and then suddenly you became divorced, then people at church will not talk to you. You'll be shunned. You will not be invited to go to choir. Women's Guild is going to kick you out. So things like that make you very susceptible to abuse. And that's why it's important for you as an individual to find the things about society that you're willing to adhere to and the things that you're willing to walk away from. It's not everything that you do should be necessarily for the sake of society to approve. You need to find for yourself the things that are most important to you and live by those. Because remember, it's your life. At the end of the day, you're the one who gets to live the reality of your behaviors and your choices. Last but definitely not least, I think it would be wrong for us to talk about why people stay in abusive relationships without talking about finances. A big reason why someone would stay in an abusive relationship is often because they don't have any money on them that they feel would be sufficient for their lifestyle. So let's say you are a person who depends on your spouse for all your financial needs to be met. Maybe it's a food, shelter, you don't have your own bank account that has your own money. You have to seek permission or approval from your spouse. When it comes to purchases, you do not have a job, you do not have any source of income. It's very easy for you to be taken advantage of by somebody who you're in a relationship with and they are an abuser. This does not mean that all the people who depend on their spouses for financial support are abused. It doesn't mean that everybody who provides in their household as the sole financial provider is an abuser. That's not the case. What we're saying is, in abusive relationships, most of the time, there's a financial element that is involved. If the one person depends fully on the other for their financial upkeep, and they don't think they have a way of making money without depending on their spouse, or the money that they have is fully tied together with their partner, so breaking apart, taking their money, their share away, would require them to have maybe a difficult conversation with their partner for them to get their money. If you can't take away your money at will, then walking away might feel like a big, big challenge. If there are children involved, you might even find it to be more challenging because now you're thinking, what's going to happen to the kids? Where do I get money for school fees? Where do I get money for shelter? Where do I get money to buy stuff for the kids? So with those three things wrapped up together, the trauma bonds, the societal and cultural pressures to stay in relationships, and the financial dependence that comes up in relationships, you find that it's difficult for people to walk away from abusive relationships. It's not always as easy as just pack and leave. As a therapist, as a psychologist, as someone who has worked with people who have been in abusive relationships, those are some of the things that came up for me when I listened to that episode. I don't know if any of this resonates with you, and if it does, I would love to hear your comments. If you are in an abusive relationship, remember that there is support that exists. The first place that you can contact is Usikimye. They have a shelter for people who are victims of abuse, so you can contact them and see how they can support you to get out of the abusive relationship. If you are in an abusive relationship, I highly encourage you to stay connected to family and friends who care for you, who love you. Don't let your abuser convince you that you are alone in the world, because you really are not. I encourage you to reach out to a therapist if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, there's a list that I always add to the description box that has contacts for free or affordable therapy services in Kenya. So check that out and then start trying to find ways to put some distance between yourself and your abuser. It really helps for you to get a bit of perspective. With that said, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you've gotten something out of it. Again, everything you'd like to say, I'd love to hear it. Leave it in the comments section of this episode. I'll see you next time on the next episode. Take care of yourselves and take care of your mental health.